Welcome to CinemaScope from True Story FM, where we illuminate the gritty, pulsating realms of cinema's most captivating subgenres. I'm Andy Nelson, your guide on this quest to uncover raw truths behind the lenses. Today, we're diving into the intense world of Brazilian favela films, a subgenre that has garnered international attention for its unflinching portrayal of life in Brazil's sprawling slums. With a focus on crime, violence, and the struggle for survival, the favela films that reach global audiences paint a vivid picture of the harsh realities faced by those on the margins. As we explore this subgenre, we'll also uncover the multifaceted nature of favela films within Brazil, where a wider range of stories and styles often remain unexplored internationally. Joining me today, I have Luiza Lusvarghi. Luiza is a journalist, professor, and researcher at the postgraduate program in multimedia of the State University of Campinas, Brazil, a member of the Cine group, a study group on cinematographic and audiovisual genres, the former director of Abracine, the Brazilian Association of Film Critics, and a member of the Elvira's Feminist Collective of Film Critics. Luiza, welcome to the show.
Hi, Andy. It's my honor to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you about these films. So before you and I started recording, you had mentioned that you consider favela films to be more of a theme rather than a single subgenre, with musical dramas and crime dramas being two distinct types. I think that's a very fascinating point, most notably because outside of Brazil, or I suppose I should only be speaking specifically to here in the U.S., many of those musical dramas don't get released here. In fact, for this episode, we had to largely limit our conversation to crime dramas because those are the ones that largely get U.S. distribution and hence are the ones that I could access. For this show, we will be discussing 5 films in the main episode: Rio, 40 Degrees from 1955, Pichote from 1980, City of God from 2002, Elite Squad from 2007, and Dry Ground Burning from 2023. And then in our extended conversation for members, we'll dive into 5 more films: Rio, Northern Zone from 1957, Black Orpheus from 1959, which is actually the only musical drama in our lineup, City of Men from 2008, Last Stop 174 from 2008 as well, and Elite Squad, The Enemy Within from 2010. This lineup, while all great films, really does say a lot about what we get exposed to and, in turn, how we see life in the Brazilian favelas. We get an impression of the crime, the violence, gang lords, drugs, this struggle to survive, but we rarely get a glimpse into these other facets of life there. So let's start here. How does this limited international exposure to primarily crime-focused favela films influence the understanding and perception of these communities?
Okay. Well, for many Brazilians, these films harm the country's image. They are hated. So, despite its international popularity, the first reception here was not good. And even the critics, the scholars, saying that there are favela films and classifying City of God as a gangster film. It's kind of a downgrading of the discussion. Just to sell the international market, just to market, for pure market.
Right.
So City of God was released as a gangster film alongside Gangs of New York by Martin Scorsese. And I remember at that time, Fernando Meirelles, the director, said that he was honored by the comparison, but here things were a little bit different in the beginning.
Yeah.
The British researcher, I don't know if you know him, Steve Neal, considers the gangster film to be a subgenre within Hollywoodian crime dramas. And he classifies them as contemporary crimes. He created a category. And inside this category, we have gangster film. But most of these films, the most recent ones, I'm talking now about Brazilian films, criticize, the condition in which people live in the communities, even when they recognize the talent of a musician, an actor, a writer, because City of God was a book, a novel, written by Paulo Lins, right? A resident of this kind of favelas.
Ah, okay.
And so, even so, I think that there are many foreigners' understanding of Brazil that are much more affected by the way Brazil has been presented in the media and in the international cinema. Not only since Ronald Biggs, Brazil is a refuge, a place to hide from the law. And it was not only because of City of God or the Favela films.
Yeah.
No, you have this in TV shows, American TV shows, lots of them.
Yeah.
So, where are you going now? Brazil.
Right.
Tornado. That's it. So it's polemic. It's controversial, this reception.
Yeah, it's definitely something that reinforces stereotypes, right? I mean, it's what largely we think of when we hear of favelas. We just go to crime-ridden, the gangsters are ruling it, and all of that, or in the case of the second Elite Squad film, the militia is ruling it, right? Like there's nothing that feels safe about any of that, and
no,
it's an interesting depiction.
On the other hand, Babenco's film Pichote, Law of the Weeks is the real title.
Right.
Focuses on that street children who have fled the favelas and make a living in the streets.
Yeah.
And end up getting involved with crimes, prostitution. One thing that greatly affected Pichote's reception here, I don't know abroad, it was that Pichote, the actor who played Pichote, was killed by police officers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was a very
after
tragic...
the end of the film, he could not survive being an actor or something like that, and he got back. So it was very bad for the community. The idea.
Tragic. And I think that's something we'll definitely talk about that when we start talking about like some of those elements that recur in these types of films. But I think that's something that we see in quite a number of these, is that they're casting people from these areas, like real people. Like they're not casting actors often, right? I mean, that seems to be kind of a trend in the films that we're looking at. I mean, in some of them for sure, yeah.
But City of God was different. We can talk about this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and like I think that's kind of one of the shifts that we've seen over the course of this, because City of God, the Elite Squad films, certainly we start getting to a place where we're bringing actors in to perform the roles.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at favela films, I mean, it is kind of this unique category in Brazilian cinema focusing on life in the favelas. Mm-hmm. And again, whether it's a theme that we see in just kind of types of films or it is a subgenre, how do they differ from other subgenres or genres? And kind of what makes them stand out as something that's distinct in cinema?
Well, films about favela don't form a single category in national cinema, in Brazilian cinema.
Yeah.
They came from two major genres in Brazilian cinema. The criminal, because we have criminals since the very beginning of the movies.
Sure.
Very popular. And always.
Around the world, everyone loves crime stories, yeah.
I suppose it is. Japan, United States. So. And so the criminals and the musicals. The latter with a lot of influence, the musicals here, with a lot of influence from I don't know the pronunciation, but it's the revue theater.
A review? Like a review?
Review theater.
Yeah.
But also from hits from the Brazilian popular music, samba, and nowadays, rap and funk, which is very popular.
Yeah.
This musics, they generate movies, video clips, films, and helps the industry of music here, which is very strong, stronger than the cinema industry, the film industry, Brazilian film industry.
Interesting. There is, I mean, I suppose there is this sense, and I think from my perspective here, talking about Brazilian favela films and the idea that we have kind of categorized it as this subgenre, not just necessarily favela films from Brazil, but just kind of this Latin American, these films that kind of depict this urban poverty in a lot of these third world countries I'm just speaking broadly, that's kind of something that has been created, I suppose, to show life in these other countries. But again, it's very limiting on what we're actually getting to see. And I mean, I grew up watching things, some like Disney things, like Disney had made those, Walt Disney had made several films that depicted kind of Latin American life, right? He did a couple films in the 40s and with Donald Duck going down to South America. And you saw like, it was all about like the music, like you're talking about, like that was a big part of those films is the samba and you get this sense of this life down there. But I feel like the studios have really latched onto this sense of depicting kind of that poverty and just kind of the gritty urban life as the thing that they want to depict, that has kind of created this subgenre that we're kind of getting. And I suppose there is this view of it as social commentary, but it's also entertainment. And I think that's kind of the blend that we get here. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, to your point, likely is the frustrating element for people in Brazil, seeing this thing that, okay, their social commentary can be good, but you don't need to always be making entertainment out of it.
Not all the time.
Yeah.
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 And so the first films about favela, we have most popular, most known, well-known, Favela dos Meus Amores, the Favela of My Loves, of My Beloved Ones, 1935. But they are this way, entertainment, a little bit entertainment, a little bit reality. So since then...
But before we continue, is that the one that you said has been lost in time as far as like the film itself is no longer available, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an unfortunate tragedy in the history of film is we've lost so many films that just aren't available at all anymore.
And so since these first ones, there has been no shortage of films with references to favelas, slums, and according to a Brazilian researcher called Arthur Altran, they are generally guided by romantic populism. And so that's the main difference between these contemporary movies, these favela movies. With Rio 40 Degrees, we have a more realistic approach, emerging, which would continue in Rio Northern Zone, both directed by Nelson Pereira dos Santos, who take parts in Cinema Novo, and Five Times Favela, and this. These narratives are much more documentary, and they are strongly influenced by Italian neorealism.
Sure. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. So, because I definitely want to get into the origins of these films, and those films both came out in the 50s. What was going on in Brazil at the time? Like where was the country socioeconomically that kind of influenced the development of this theme in Brazilian cinema? Because that hadn't been the norm at the time in Brazilian movies, right? It was a little more Hollywood, the style of films in Brazil. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the 50s.
You're right, yeah.
In the 50s, they start to build Brasilia, the new capital.
Yeah, which is more in the center of the country.
Yeah, populism has much more to do with this. And Rio 40 Degrees was something totally in opposition to these feelings of that time, the 50s. How was the slogan of the president? I cannot remember. 5 years in 50. You know, what does it mean?
Yeah.
We will be great, the greatest country of South America, and blah blah blah. We are developing the economy, more industries. That was the spirit.
Okay.
From the government.
Right.
But the real 40 degrees has nothing to do in common with this. And so you can imagine the critics love it, but the people, the public, not this much. But okay, it was important for that moment.
Right. And that, it kind of starts this shift that you have towards cinema novo, right? What can you describe what that is and why film kind of shifted in that direction?
Is cinema novo?
Yeah.
Well, along the cinema novo movement, you have very different kinds of movies, of films.
Yeah.
But cinema novo has privileged the backlands. People from the backlands, the Northwest. Glauber was from Bahia. And at that time, the left-wing movements, they are much more targeting this population because they believe that the revolution will come from the backlands, the poor people.
Yeah.
But you have lots of movies about urban cities. They were being destroyed by industries and blah, as in the worldwide. No, you have conflicts. And cinema novo was very important. But now we know that you have different kinds of movies or films being produced that are very important also.
Yeah. What was the political climate? Was it positive? Like were people feeling fairly positive about the direction that the country was moving at that time, or like because I'm guessing that there was some internal conflict between the direction that the politicians wanted to move the country, but the way that the people felt like, I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling like you're making anything better for my life. Is that kind of the mood?
So the intellectual students, the intellectuals, critics, they loved the movies.
Yeah.
But Glauber is not this popular. I don't know. He there in the United States.
Yeah.
As you know, it's very difficult to watch the movies. Doesn't matter they are not good, or I'm not talking about this. But great audiences, no. They don't have, but they are very respected.
Yeah.
Internationally and here.
Interesting. So with these films, I mean, the focus of the films starting like in the 50s as they started kind of making some of these stories, as Nelson Pereira dos Santos was kind of making these films, it definitely did kind of create this shift in some of the stories that were being told. How did these changes manifest in terms of kind of the focus of the stories, the style they were being told in, the themes? We've already talked about pulling in some of the Italian neorealist style, kind of very raw, real, gritty. What else was coming out of these?
Well, Nelson was much more popular than Glauber. I'm talking about the audiences. No, you understand, no?
Yeah.
It's easier to watch Real 30 Degrees than, whatever other. And, well, Real 40 Degrees was the first of a trilogy he was planning to produce. The second one was Real Northern Zone.
Yep.
And the last one will be Real South Zone. Okay?
Yeah.
About the city, the elite, the city, the touristic city. But Real Northern Zone was not well succeeded in the audiences, in the movie theaters. And then he never concluded Real South Zone.
Gotcha.
But he made lots of other kinds of movies, not only about Rio, about urban cities.
Yeah.
He was very prolific as a director.
Yeah.
As a filmmaker. It's very important. But in a way or another, he founded a new way to look at the city, the touristic city.
Which,
no
which
more,
is very important.
no more. Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
no more a postcard. Rio is not a postcard.
Yeah. Right.
There's problems. Come on, let's take a look on this.
Right. See the real world. Right.
The real world.
Yeah. Obviously there's a level of artists approaching anything that they do. There's artistic motivations to kind of tell stories. Is it that they were seeing this world and wanted other people to pay attention and recognize to the realities of what was going on?
I don't know if I understand the answer. Please.
Oh, sure. The question. So the artists. What am I trying? Let me see if I can figure it out for you. Motivação dos filmmakers. Wanting to show this world to people. Does that?
But you are asking me about all the directors, all the filmmakers?
Not all of them, but specifically these ones who started telling these types of stories, like Glauber Rocha and Nelson Pereira dos Santos. Like, is there an element that they saw? Like, what did they see? I guess what was their motivation to want to tell these stories? Like, was it just that they wanted people to recognize that this was some people's reality?
Well, I think that Glauber, it was much more interest on create a Brazilian cinema.
Mm-hmm.
As a projection of the national imaginary, He was also a reporter. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he made a TV show for a long time, bro. He was a critic. He rewrite critics. He just loved Western.
Yeah, interesting.
As a genre.
Yeah.
Look at it. So, but Glauber, I think he was much more this artist. So, and Nelson, since the beginning was interested in, a Brazilian cinema with a strong identity, but also popular. And he made lots of different movies, and some of them very experimental. And others totally different.
Yeah. And recent films too. Like he was making films up until somewhat recently, right?
Yeah, he has lived more than Glauber. No, Glauber was gone. He was young.
Yeah, right.
And Nelson died with 8 years old.
Yeah, right.
He made, but he was much more. He was much more worried about this kind of thing. It's good. Oh, but it's popular. Everybody's watching. No, why? Yeah. And he was very criticized because of this, because he made different productions, very different.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting element. And as we move into talking about like what are the distinct characteristics that we see in these favela films, like what are the core components that that they use to tell these stories? I suppose that's, also part of it is like, what is it about using these components and telling these stories did they see as the popular ones that they thought would draw the audiences in, right? Like one of the main things that I definitely notice in the early days for sure, I shouldn't necessarily just say that, all the way up to Dry Ground Burning, is they're casting non-professional actors to play these roles. There are exceptions, City of God, the City of Men films, the Elite Squad films, but a lot of the films that we have in our discussion, they're non-professional actors who are playing these roles. That kind of taps into that neorealist element of them, right?
Right. But they're different kinds of productions and styles.
Yeah.
City of God, the casting was, you don't have them known. They are in search of different faces, not faces from the TV shows, from the novellas, the soap operas, or from the movies. They are looking for this unknown faces. But they have the support of a group called Nós do Morro. Will be something like We from the Slums, a theater group created in a favela called Vidigal, the favela Vidigal of Vidigal. They exist even today. And so that boys you see in the movie, they made exercises, so they are being prepared for this. They are not just, oh, hello, come here. We are in need of an actor like you, just like you. No, they were not.
Right.
And that was the idea. It was very, Dry Ground Burning. It's another thing.
Yeah.
Dry Ground Burning, the director came from not the favela, but a suburban city, a very violent city called Ceilândia, located in the surrounding area of Brasília, the capital.
Okay.
And so the favela Sol Nascente, in a free translation, Rising Sun, is the name of the favela, Rising Sun. Adirley Queiroz and Joana Pimenta, two directors, they are interested in just showing them the reality.
Right.
They don't have a script. I don't know if you have noticed.
Yeah.
Just some sketches or ideas. No, so let's start.
It's very
blah, blah. Okay. And all the time they look for real people.
Yeah.
And so Leia, the main character, is a woman, in Dry Ground Burning.
Yep.
She was in prison. Okay.
Wow.
She was in prison. I don't remember, but you have a specific name for this when you go out from the prison, but you have to respect some things.
Like you're on parole?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So she's a real one. She's a criminal.
Yeah. Well,
a small drug dealer, so she never killed anybody. Okay, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But she's a bandit.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, well, and that's it. And Queiroz is searching for this, and he classified all their productions as science fiction documentary. The way they classify.
Yeah. Interesting.
But why documentary?
Yeah.
No, it's a documentary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And
Science fiction, why? I think it's the same conception of Margaret Atwood. No, she always said this. Oh, my writings, my books, and the films are speculative fiction. She doesn't goes to the science fiction. No, but
speculative fiction makes more sense.
more ethnofiction.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so, I mean, it's such an interesting example. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about Dry Ground Burning when we get to our list of films. But just looking at the kind of the broad picture of all these different things, I mean, we're definitely in the films we're seeing a realistic portrayal, I guess we could say, of life in the favelas. You know, where the films definitely are focusing on social issues. We're seeing the poverty. There's a lot of violence and gangs. And from my perspective, I can't tell, maybe you know more, but it looks like they're shooting on location in real favelas. Would you say that's accurate for these?
Yeah.
They're shooting on location? Yeah.
Yeah. And Leia will be Leah, I suppose in English, but Leia is a homosexual.
Yep.
Assumed homosexual. He wants to set up a warehouse. She dreams of this. I don't know. And Queiroz and Pimenta, they have prior films. No, but all the time with a male protagonist. It's the first one with so many women, and the male protagonist of the other films. As Blackout, Black In, White Out.
Yeah.
Well, Marquinhos da Tropa, she's a wheelchair user. You know, but why you have so many wheelchairs users in your movies and he replied that Ceilândia, the city of Rising, was one of the places in the world with the highest number of wheelchairs users he had ever seen in his life.
Wow.
And most of them were shot by police bullets, but it's
that's wild to think of that the most wheelchair users in that place. Before we keep going and talking about that film, let's jump back. I want to go back to Rio 40 Degrees and talk a little bit about that. And that's 40 degrees Celsius, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so people can understand what the title is referencing. We're following it's kind of a day in the life. The film follows this day. We're following 5 kids who are selling peanuts. They live in the favelas. They're going down into Rio to try to sell peanuts and make some money because they want to buy a soccer ball. And then we also subsequently end up following some of the people that they come into contact with, right? We're following a woman who is pregnant with her boyfriend and trying to get him to marry her. There's a politician, where we have a number of different people that we kind of track over the course of the film. And we see their struggles, their aspirations, and we're definitely getting a sense of the social and economic disparities in the film as, these kids are trying to sell their peanuts and they get knocked over or they get lost or they get taken by these other kids to sell them so that they can make money. It's an interesting story as we're following all of this. How does this film really kind of set the groundwork for these films and in the scope of Brazilian cinema, what is its significance?
Well, the very significant. I think that after Rio 40 Degrees was impossible to show Aslan like in the prior movies. So he definitely changed the way you see that people.
Yeah.
In the screen. I'm not talking about the prejudice, the danger, because things getting worse and more worse with the organized crime, mobs, and so I don't know if you can classify as a mob in the real sense, no, but now it's very different. But it changes the way you show that people in the screen. Yeah, definitely. You have the old way you have in some movies. But that's the most important thing. Pisciotti, no, Pisciotti was different. It came much more from a fiction. And I suppose that Babenco was much more interested in talk about the childhood, the abandonment of the childhood in the streets than in the favelas.
Well, and that's an interesting, because we definitely have the kids in Rio 40 Degrees, right? They're kind of the central characters that we're following, but they all have a home. They all live there.
Yes.
Right? So they're just, and they're working. They're young, they're working, they're going to go out and stuff. One kid ends up getting killed over the course of the story, and it ends very like a haunting shot as we see his mom. Everyone's celebrating Carnival, but his mom, we see her still just waiting for him to return. And it's just like a haunting way to end the film. But they have, ostensibly happy lives, right? They're young and they're working. They're doing something to make some money so that they can buy a soccer ball. So that it doesn't seem as necessarily as tragic yet. Life is tough, but it's not riddled with crime, I guess, No,
they're doing their best to.
Yeah. And so that definitely fits kind of the Italian neorealist style. Is that we're seeing this social realist story of the people and their working. And there is that critique also as we see them trying to struggle. We see some of the richer people as they look down on them. We hear the people on the beach talking about these people. Like there's interesting conversations. We're getting a very broad spectrum. In fact, in all of these films, this may be the one that gives us the broadest spectrum of opinions and insights from different sides of the community, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Pisciotti was made in the 80s, no?
Yeah, 1980.
Another context, but you have much more fantasy in a certain way, a drama, different.
Pisciotti, or as you said, Pisciotti, the law of the week is kind of the translation of the full title in English. This film follows this young kid. He's a 10-year-old boy named Pisciotti. He's from the favelas. We start the film. He ends up in this juvenile detention center, and it's kind of like learning to live on your own sort of story. It's very tough, and that's the thing that makes this film so interesting is like how difficult the adult world is, right? He's seeing crime, he's seeing gangs, he's seeing sexual encounters, all of these different things that, because then they escape and they go from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro where they, to sell drugs, and his life kind of his friendship circle dwindles. People keep leaving or getting killed, and it finally is just him and this prostitute that they're living with. And you have that haunting shot of him where he's really kind of broken and he goes into a fetal position on her lap and is like, almost infantile as he's kind of breastfeeding on her before she kicks him out. And that's the end of the film. He leaves kind of walking and walking along a train track. And it is an interesting shift in this genre because now we're only with these kids, and it's only kids who are streetless or homeless, living on the streets.
Yeah.
And turning to crime, essentially, right? So how does that shift from 1955 with Rio 40 Degrees to this? Like, we're getting this big shift in and maybe it's just what Hector Babenco wanted to say, but it's a shift in kind of that social realism or social commentary as we kind of shift to look at this life.
Yes, it's the end of the period,
Innocence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
It was the end of the innocence, and it was another context, of course. And shot never shows the favelas, the cities, the families, as you pointed, but the streets. They only have the streets, the abandonment, childhood, the streets, families they form, no? They embrace the small gangs. And this film was based on a novel called Pichote, Childhood of the Dead.
Yeah. Oof.
Written by a journalist called José Louzeiro. And it was kind of a bestseller here in Brazil. And but the screenplay was written by Babenco and Jorge Durão. Two foreigners, no? Babenco was Argentinian and Durão, it's Chilean, if I'm not.
Shit. Good.
And they look at, I suppose they look at for a more universal approach of the problem. You can compare with other cities in the world, the great cities with kids in the streets, and you have something. I think it was intentional, no? This.
Yeah.
They build I suppose a very cruel portray. They portray a very cruel world for these kids. And there's something else. The kids that I think it's much more about Babenco than favela movies or so. All their movies has only a transgender character. They have in Pichote, no, is the friend of Pichote.
Right.
In Carandiru, they have in the Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Yeah.
Very important.
Big part of that one. Well, that's an interesting, because we do have that, as you said, in Dry Ground Burning as well. Not necessarily transgender, but a homosexual character that we have our lesbian protagonist. And, I think that that's an interesting element because in the scope of creating a community in both films, really, they're showing us this community that isn't the main population, but they're much more accepting. And that's, I think, something
much more accepting.
Very interesting.
They have acceptance.
Yeah. It was very interesting to see in both of the films.
They naturalize this in a way or another.
Yeah, right, exactly. Pichote, it's such an interesting film in the way that it kind of explores the story. And I suppose in the scope of these films, it was really kind of the first one that had more international recognition and certainly made more of an impact because it's the first one that I had heard of when I was younger, and perhaps would lead to our next film that we get to, which is City of God in 2002. And so you could almost see the trajectory in that international draw to watching these types of stories, going from Pichote in 1980 all the way to City of God in 2002. This film, directed by Fernando Meirelles and Katia Lund, it's set in the Cidade de Deus favela of Rio de Janeiro, and it takes place over several decades. So far, this is the one that feels the most cinematic, right? I mean, we're definitely we're jumping back and forth through time. We have different chapters as we explore different characters, and we start with them young, and then we watch how these two young men, Rocket and Lil Z, how they kind of navigate the world, one moving away from it, but always living there, and eventually kind of becoming a journalist and kind of a photojournalist and documenting it, and the other one turning toward the life of crime and violence and kind of taking things over. What really made this film a turning point for this type of storytelling, and how does it balance, I suppose you could say, the social commentary with this more stylized storytelling?
Well, there are many, many points, but I think that the City of God doesn't judge its characters.
Yeah.
And that's the reason for much of the shock it causes. It's one. The film breaks with a certain way of approaching the social exclusion that descends from cinema novo, but it's not a reproduction, and can be found in some of the films of the 90s. So, in City of God, the bad guys are indeed the good guys.
Yeah.
They're the main characters. No? The drug dealers are heroes in a way. They're the good guys sometimes. That is shocking.
Yeah.
And there's the question of the narrative. No, the way the strategy of narrative. They're full of irony, reminiscent of action films. That's something in common with action films. In the book, this isn't as pronounced. Everybody dies in the books. You don't have main characters dying.
Wow.
They're dying all the time. The main character of the book is City of God.
Oh, okay. The city
Not
itself.
the characters.
Yeah.
Well, it's another way to set things. And okay. One of the protagonists of the book wants to be a writer. But he's not as naive as the boy in the movie. No, he wants to be a photographer, but he's so shy. No. The main character of the book, one of the most interesting characters of the book, wants to be a writer, but he dies. There's no way out for City of God. That's the idea of the main idea of the writer.
Yeah.
You have to change everything.
Does that
in the City of God, you have some kinds of the boy wants to be a photographer and he will realize this dream in a way or another. And the TV show they're producing now, he's back.
The TV show that you're talking about is called City of Man.
About City of God, he's a photographer. Wow. No, he can do all the things. And so, because that's the message, everyone dies because that form of social organization has no way out. That's the idea of the writer Paulo Lins. And in the movie, you will find something. It's in the way to narrate. You have something kind of relief, but not this much. No. But in the end, some drug dealers are arrested, disappear in the newspaper articles. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
So there's a solution. No. One third of this casting was made from a selection of I was saying to you, a selection of young people who were already doing amateur work. The group Nós do Morro, We from the Slums, and other actors recruited from a process that would result in the creation of NGA. I don't know how to say it's only in Portuguese, but NGO, non-government organization. Non-governmental organization.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's it. It's all. This strategy is very different from Real 40 Degrees, diagram burning. Okay, it's much more organized and and many of these actors of the movie they have their careers now.
Yeah,
their lives. They're in the TV shows. They're in the movies, doing movies.
Yeah, it's definitely a shift, that we've gone to a film that feels like a movie, right? This feels like it didn't need to even be based on a book or real life. It could have just been, a fiction that somebody wrote that happened to take place in this favela, and we're just kind of watching this. Like it feels so cinematic, and I think that's something that likely with the push, for domestic or international release, I think that's one of the selling points for it, is that it's a film that was easy to market. I think that's why it was so stylized, and the nonlinear narrative is something that people really enjoy watching, kind of nonlinear storytelling. And it's, it fits in with kind of, I mean, you mentioned the comparison that they had, feeling excited to be compared to Scorsese. And I think that's something that, Scorsese is another filmmaker who excels at making stories about life of crime. Like many of his films have certainly taken that approach, and I think that that's something that Morales and Lund, in making this, they tapped into that in a very strong way and made something that just, I think, allowed for it to reach a broader audience. And I think that was something that, and again, the drawback is more people who watch it think, oh, this is what life is like in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then speaking to our next film, because I think City of God certainly leads to where we're going, and that's Elite Squad, 2007, Jose Padilla's film. This is another very cinematic, very filmic type of story. It's the story of Captain Nascimento, as he is the leader of this special police unit called BOPE, and they have been tasked with combating the drug trafficking and all the crime in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. And that's kind of the big, the focus of the story. But again, we have a story that feels very structured in the way it's being told. We've got the wraparound device. It starts with a scene that happens later in the film, and then we jump back in time to kind of explore how we got to that point where this big shootout is going down. So again, it feels very much in line with what City of God had kind of created. So how does this approach this genre or this subgenre differently? And I guess from the perspective of the law enforcement now, and what really are the implications that we end up getting from this shift in focus?
Elite Squad, no?
That's what?
Are you asking me about Elite Squad?
Yeah, Elite Squad, right. Tropa de Elite.
Okay. And so, Elite Squad was the box office was great, one of the greatest in Brazil.
Yeah.
And but it's not exactly considered a favela movie or a favela film, but a police action movie.
Sure, yeah.
And that was the great difference, because police officers in Brazil, they don't have a good, how can I say, people much more fear them than trust them. Historically, I'm trying to talk about the Republic, the meaning. No?
Yeah. Oh.
Throughout our story, we never had a movie with such a strong police presence.
Yeah.
Stories of robbers, crimes, but police protagonists, never. Very few. Our police have always been very poor, often seen by the population more as a threat than as a security.
Yeah.
Supporting dictatorships.
Yeah.
It's not completely true, but it's the image. Now, despite the fact that these police officers are truculent and violent, Elite Squad became the country's biggest box office hit in its release.
Wow.
And put the police forces in the spotlight.
Yeah, right. For good and for bad.
For good and for bad.
Yeah.
But young people just loved this.
Yeah.
I have many students whose parents are police officers. And they told me, oh, teacher, how great. I fear Captain Nascimento, but they love.
Yeah.
Was a good example.
Well, and it's interesting because there's definitely Nascimento is, I guess you could say, quote, one of the good guys, right? Like he comes into this wanting to get rid of corrupt police officers. And we'll certainly talk more about that in our member conversation, when we talk about the sequel, because there's definitely more of that as he moves farther into politics. But that's like, he sees their special police unit, BOPI, as this opportunity to help kind of clean up crime, and especially knowing that so many of the actual police officers out there are corrupt. And that is, I think that's such an interesting thing, that it did lead to this very controversial reception when the movie was released, and allowed for more of a public discourse about what is actually happening, like in Brazil, both probably within your country, but also outside of the country, about like looking at what is happening in Brazil with its police that is allowing it to be so corrupt and corruptible.
Yeah, that's the fame. Yeah. But that it's part of our history. They had never been independent of this government. It's another story.
Yeah.
The history, the Brazilian history, is very different from United States history in this point.
Sure.
Okay. Yes. And they are kind of supporters of the army. It's something complicated.
Yeah.
And so these elite squads, these special squads, are a way to say, oh, we want to end up with this corruption, the good guy.
Yeah.
But also violence, very violence. No, yeah. In the first movie, no, Elite Squad 1, and in the second you have something different.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Elite Squad came out at a time that the real police were beginning to develop a project to pacify the favelas called the Pacifying Police Unity, UPP. UPP.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was this thing. But many critics don't like the Captain Nascimento, because his methods.
Yeah, his methods. And I think that's the dark element of the story, is we're watching this. And I suppose there's this element of like, which comes up in the second film, because it's like, well, they work, but where does that lead to?
Wow.
And who's really behind it?
They are worse than the bandits, please.
Yeah, right. No, that's very interesting.
No, they cannot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting portrayal for sure. And it's I mean, I do like that in this conversation, we are getting to kind of at least have that other perspective of, okay, so many of our stories have been the people who live there. Now we're looking at the police who are trying to figure out what to do about it. Not just the special squad that's looking at what do we do about that, but also what do we do about these corrupt police officers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump into our last film here, Dry Ground Burning, directed by Joana Pimenta and Aderly Queiroz. This is 2023. This film, as we've already discussed, is set in a favela in around Brasileira. This is the Sol Nascente favela. And we're following a group of women, and they run an illegal oil refinery. As you were saying, it's interesting, like they want to start up this actual business. Right. And they end up finding themselves kind of in conflict with the authorities and trying to figure out how we can make this thing work. But it's interesting because there's definitely the plot to this story, but it feels very loose, as you were saying. It doesn't necessarily feel as scripted. It feels like they were just coming up with elements and moods that they wanted to kind of create over the course of this. How does this film, which is the most recent on our list, 2023, represent the current state of this subgenre or theme of favela films, and what new perspectives and themes does this actually introduce now?
I don't know, because Queiroz is very unique in the Brazilian movies about favelas, but not only. In science fiction, in this, we call them garage films, lo-fi films.
Yeah.
It's a trend, a strong one.
Oh, interesting. So that's a theme in the all the different types of films that they're making. They all feel very lo-fi.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Sunrising, Ceilândia, they don't have cinemas, movie theaters. They don't have.
Interesting. Yeah.
Look at this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I do think what's interesting is we're still seeing a lot of the same issues in the favelas. And as you said, we're casting real people for this film. We're casting these people are real women who have lived in the favelas, who have been in prison, and their characters are named after the actresses playing the roles, right? Like all of it feels like there is, I mean, you already mentioned there is this blending in this of documentary and fiction. In fact, there are times in the film where suddenly it's like they're talking to somebody being interviewed or like interviewing them. And it's a little off-putting as you're watching it. I mean, I had to stop and go like, wait a minute, who are they talking to? Is this like trying to figure out, is this partially a documentary too? Like trying to figure out exactly what the structure was of this, because it is so unique. But that being said, I think we're getting so much about the kind of the continuation of the struggles of people in these favelas. And I think that's something we're seeing is the cycle and how it's so hard to break out of the cycle. Looking all the way back to Rio 40 Degrees, they're trying to, these kids are trying to sell peanuts to make some money, and they're always pushed down, right? And we see that through Pichote and then City of God and even in Elite Squad from the perspective of the police. But all of these people are trying to just make a living and survive and do something, but it's like society, like they can't break out of the cycle that they're in. And that's definitely something we see here with these women as they're, we follow one of them, Leia, who's out of prison and trying to move on, but she gets back into the cycle and it's like hard because what else are they going to do? And I think is it Andrea, the one who's really trying to make a change and goes into politics, and she's running for office. And I think that was like the biggest change that we saw with one of these characters over the films.
I think there is something else about Queiroz and Pimenta.
Yeah.
They don't believe in democracy or governments. It's clear.
Yeah.
They have this conscience. No, Leia, Chitara, no her, sister. They are not expecting something else from the government, the president, whatever.
Yeah.
And in the another favela films or movie films about the Health Squad, everything we mentioned here, you don't have this conscience.
Yeah.
Okay? They are suffering, they are making a living, they are dreaming of being accepted. They want to be actors, journalists, something.
Right.
And all the movies of Queiroz and Pimenta, you never will find this.
Interesting.
It's something very different. Politically, and I suppose he's not worried. They are not worried about the audiences.
Yeah.
They don't have a great audience. You right?
Yeah.
But they don't seem worried about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely an interesting step in the direction of the films that we're looking at, because as different as they are as far as like their type of storytelling, they're still sticking with a lot of these elements that we've been discussing. So let's move on from here and just like looking at favela films, they have, for good or for bad, they've left a mark on Brazilian cinema and certainly have influenced various aspects of society and culture. What are some of the key areas where you can see the impact that favela films have made, both within Brazil and internationally?
I cannot understand your point. What's the impact in there? Another.
Yeah, what's the impact? What is their influence? Do you see in other films have these films had an impact on Brazilian cinema by introducing different themes and styles and narratives?
Well, in Brazilian cinema, I can see worldwide. I think it's different. I cannot measure this. I cannot evaluate this. So if you, without an example, say, "Oh, that movie."
Yeah, right.
What do you think about this movie? Because how can I say that the architecture of the poverty is the same in the worldwide? A friend of mine told me once. You have the slums, the poor people, but you have some difference. You have the religion. You have so many other another elements to judge and these things. The Philippines, Thailand.
Right.
Well, it's
India, wherever,
India, yeah. So you have different ways to approach. But in Brazilian cinema, that's it. I think that they change it real 30 degrees, 40 degrees, so just time didn't. Here 40 degrees, City of God, Elite Square. Yeah, they change the way you look to those people. Doesn't matter. I'm not suggesting that the movies can change society, because I don't believe in this. So it's but the movies, they are not the same. You never will find a very how can I say, a fashion decorated house or home in favelas now. When you there's something, I think it's much more difficult to perceive, because I have this difficulty with an American movie and the way people speaks. Okay, because when you made the subtitles, you change the way people speak.
Yeah.
If you have a slang, an expression very local, you change. No?
Sure. Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
But all these movies, besides the sceneries and so, they change the way that people speak in the screen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, right. I suppose that's an inevitable element of trying to translate films for different parts of the world, right? You're gonna miss out on some of that local flavor, the sense of
the
elements that feel much more. Yeah, the accent, that something that feels so tied to that particular place.
So when I'm talking about realism, I'm talking about this.
Sure.
And it was the same in the novel, City of God, and it changed,
But do you think
you cannot wonder a boy who in the streets talking as a student of this thing,
Right,
It's not this.
But do you think there's an element to telling these stories that is helping raise awareness about some of the social issues and kind of trying to kind of create an influence on social and political movements by telling the stories?
Not in the sense, no, strange. No,
Yeah.
Understood. But yeah. This bad reception, the polemic, the newspapers, in a way or another, are highlighting these things, all these things, the social conflict, because it exists. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you have all these differences placed in the screen, you have much more to talk about, no?
Yeah.
It's different from a TV show, when you have the news. We're watching the news in TV, but it's different.
Yeah.
Because someone is narrating the things. No, and so you have something talking about a statement. Oh, what do you think about it? That's it's different, in these things.
Yeah.
But we don't have the same Brazil from the 5 Times Favela. Because 5 Times Favela was produced by the National Association of the Students.
This is the film 5 Times Favela that you're talking about.
5 Times Favela was produced by an association. Think about it. No, we don't have these things, but we have theater groups that are debating these things.
Yeah.
You have new producers.
Yeah, it's such an interesting set of films to look at. And I think that there is an interesting look at shedding light on the challenges going on in the favelas. And at the very least, it's sparking conversations about kind of social justice, urban development, gentrification. Like, there are a lot of different elements that we're seeing. And as you said, with these films, that the first one, Favela, or 5 Times Favela, which isn't available here in the States to watch, unfortunately, but they're empowering these favela communities, giving them a platform, right? And I think that's an important element of these. So, well, Luiza, thank you so much for joining me to discuss this again, whether it's a subgenre or a theme. It's a fascinating conversation to have. I certainly appreciate you joining me to look at these films and what they're saying.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. Do you have anywhere online? Yeah, well, I love the films. It's a great set of films, regardless of kind of all of the different elements that we're talking about. I think they're great films to look at and to kind of explore Brazil. Do you have anywhere online that you hang out where people can follow you and on the socials?
Well, I'm not just a critic and researcher, but I've also become a book publisher.
Hey, fantastic.
Oh, yeah, but I'm the founding partner of a very small independent publishing house called Politeama. I don't know if it's the way you will pronounce in English, but the old movie theaters in Brazil, they are called Politeamas. And we are releasing a seal called Fantastica, which is aimed to discuss fantastic genre, cinema, fantasy, horror, all the genres.
Nice.
And I will be there. Are you hearing this?
Am I what? I'm hearing. It sounds like construction or something going on. Yeah.
Yeah. I cannot hear you. But we can record this in the way I can send you an audio. But yeah, I will be there in Politeama.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, Send me any links. We'll make sure we include links in the show notes so that people can check it out.
I'd love
to. Absolutely. Next month, it is a little bit of a mystery. Not exactly sure what we're going to be talking about next month. It could be folk horror. It could be the French New Wave. I'm not sure. Wait until next month. It'll be a fantastic surprise, regardless of no matter what we end up talking about. So again, muito obrigado to Luiza, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on CinemaScope, part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. Music by Orcus and Diezmo. Find us and the entire Next Reel family of film podcasts at truestory.fm. Follow us on social media at The Next Reel, and please rate and review us if your podcast app allows. As we part ways, remember, your cinematic journey never ends. Stay curious.